Hello and welcome to episode 257 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. In my parents' guest bedroom in Ripon, California, I'm Nathan Fox. With me in Vienna, Virginia, Ben Olson. You're back from the beach, Ben?
Yeah.
Awesome. Today on the show, we have an interview we already recorded with Aaron Taylor of AccessLex. I'm excited for everybody to hear this interview, Ben. I think that was awesome. I think Aaron is going to be a big hit, talking about what we can do to fix law schools in lots of different ways. We're also going to talk about news. I guess we'll lead with this news from the July LSAT-Flex, where LSAC just lost some of the scores.
I really want to know what percentage.
They say it's a very small percentage, but as we know from LSAT studies, small percentage or even very small percentage is an inherently subjective term. And we have no idea what that might mean.
They also, by the way, side note, they referred to 25 people at one point in one of their emails. Maybe we'll get to that today, but at first I was like, oh, only 25 people lost. And then I reread the sentence and it was like 25 people of a certain group. And it was like, oh, okay.
Right.
So it could be a lot larger.
Well, yeah, they're talking about 25 who are applying this fall.
Oh, yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
Which no one should be doing. That should be a microscopic percentage of the people who are taking the July test. So they lost 25 of the scores of the people who are applying this fall right now, which is crazy. I mean, imagine that stress. But that's probably the best thing that ever happened to those people, by the way. Like if you're trying to get a score right now to go to in July to go to law school in September, you are doing it wrong. So it's like they did you a favor, maybe. Anyway, we'll get to that. We also have a report from a student who went from a 152 to a 177 on their LSAT. Ben, yesterday I was getting inundated by those kinds of messages. I know you were too. We were trading a lot of emails yesterday. I heard some people crash and burn on the July LSAT, but I also heard a lot of people who kicked ass on the July LSAT. I don't know what's going on. It almost made me feel weird. Like it made me feel like they made it easier or something. I can't believe how many huge increases we've heard.
Yeah. A couple of things are going on here though, right? Like, first of all, the demon has become the only method in which people prepare now. We've also added, I mean, for us, right? The people that interact with us.
Yeah.
So we have the demon and we have classes every day of the week and a variety of classes, targeted classes. Right before we would teach a class and it'd be like, hey, everybody come, we're going to talk to you for a few hours. And then you're out of here. Now it's like, hey,
people would go away for 2 weeks. And come back having done nothing in the meantime for my classes in lots of cases. But now everybody's working every day.
Every day, live classes, targeted classes on whatever you want to focus on.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of that's helping too, because we have based it somewhat on science and what we have felt seems to work. And then you add in the Flex, which is now a 3-section test online at home. So people aren't running to some building.
Maybe.
Yeah. But it's like training for a marathon. And then they said, okay, well, we'll do pretty much a half marathon.
Yeah, could be. All right, we'll get to that.
All these things. Anyway, sorry. Yeah.
No, you're fine. This show is going to air on Monday, August 3rd. Upcoming dates that you might need to put on your calendar. We have the August 21st deadline to sign up for the October LSAT. I still just can't believe how goddamn far in advance you have to register for the LSAT. It just makes no sense, Ben. Why? For what? For what possible?
Especially now, right? There's no...
Well, you have to sign up for it, and then you also have to sign up for a ProctorU window later. Why don't they just make it continuous, and you can just sign up for a ProctorU administered test whenever? I'm sick of it. Like you have to sign up so far in advance. You have to also wait 3 weeks for your scores, and then LSAC just loses your scores. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? I signed up for this test 3 months ago, and now you're telling me on the score release date, oh, we don't have your score. Sorry. Anyway,
someone was shit in the bed for like the last 2.5 weeks, or actually the last 3 weeks, right? They found out the day of, and they're like, President.
Well, that's the other thing.
We don't have their scores.
Why does it take 3 weeks to get your scores? And LSAC didn't know they had lost your scores until the score release date. What?
I have no idea.
Anyway, we'll get to it.
Yeah.
So Friday, August 21st, that is the deadline to sign up for the October LSAT. So if you're hearing this now and you want to take the test this fall, you need to go onto LSAC website and pay them $200 so you can sign up for this awesome experience that you're about to have.
Earlier than usual, right? Usually it's
earlier.
Like a month out.
It feels earlier, but I don't know. I don't know. Saturday, August 29th is the beginning of the August LSAT-Flex testing week. That only is relevant to you if you're already signed up for the test. So sign up a full 8 days before even the test in August. You can email the show if you would like to complain about these or other issues. You can email the show, help@thinkinglsat.com. Oh, complain about us by all means. So we definitely deserve it. When you email us, there's a chance that your picture might get used on our social media if you would like. So picture of you and your pet armadillo studying for the LSAT. Go ahead and send that in to us. Leave us a review on iTunes if you get a chance. It really does help people find the show. So I know you get begged to do that all the time, but we're going to continue to beg you to do that because it's the only way people are going to find us. Okay, you ready to get into this update regarding the July LSAT-Flex scores?
Sure.
This was an email to you. Oh, wait, this is an email from our friend Eric. He really is a nice guy, by the way. Eric at LSAC sends this email out to all test prep providers. I believe him to be a genuine good guy. Unfortunately, the LSAC just keeps fucking up. But anyway, here's a sort of mea culpa from Eric. I'll let you read it, Ben.
Sure. So it says, Dear Ben, as you are probably aware, we recently identified a technical issue for a small number of candidates who took the July test. Okay, small number, vague, right? But whatever. This issue affected how their answers were transmitted into our system, which caused their answers not to store properly.
The subject of the sentence is this issue, right?
Yeah.
It's not we lost their scores. It's there was an issue that affected how their answers were transmitted into the system, which caused their answers not to store properly, as if the answers themselves, like a magnet that was turned the wrong direction. The answers were like, no, we don't want to go in there. Anyway.
It's all very passive. This is like the universe. Okay. We discovered the issue. We didn't cause it. We just came across this issue during our scoring process.
Try to get right up on the mic, Ben. I think you're a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
We have tried multiple
now
ways.
It's worse. Now you're blowing out the mic too much. Sorry. I thought it was going to be better.
It's okay. How's this?
It's all right. Something's a little fishy with your setup today, but that's okay.
All right. Dear listeners, I apologize.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
We discovered the issue during our scoring process. So the answers there was an issue, you see, and the issue caused a problem where the answers didn't want to store themselves in the system. But LSAC, what they did was they discovered the issue. They discovered the problem. You see, they're like sleuths. Went in. It's awesome.
When the solution starts taking place, all of a sudden the subject of the sentence becomes them again.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
amazing. It's good, actually. I mean, that's probably the right decision for them to make to phrase it all this way.
Well, this is interesting. This issue did not occur in the May and June tests. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I skipped
a couple sentences.
Yeah, we have tried multiple ways to recover the answers and are continuing to investigate the issue in hopes that we can recover scores for at least some of the affected candidates. You know, if we hadn't interviewed, what's his name today, Aaron, the title of this episode would have had to been The Issue.
Yeah.
Anyways, it continues. This issue did not occur in the May and June tests. We have made changes in our online testing platform to make sure this does not happen in the future. We deeply regret that this happened and are contacting all affected test takers to provide them with options. In particular, we are moving quickly to recreate a free retake opportunity as early as next week of August 3rd, for any affected test taker with scores available within a week or less. We are also, so you can calculate scores within a week. That's nice to know. We are also providing a full refund for their July LSAT-Flex registration fee and for free law school reports. Again, we're providing coupons for things that already don't cost us very much, if anything. For any candidate who wishes to take the free test retest later, they can do so through this testing cycle, which ends April 2021. It appears that about 25 of the affected test takers had applied for admission this fall, and so we will work with them and the schools to which they have applied to ensure the schools are aware of this situation and will provide as much flexibility as possible, given that the circumstances are not in any way the fault of the candidate.
No shit.
Period.
No shit. I don't think you needed to include that part because
we know that
you
the issue took place because of you. Anyways, we appreciate your concern and support for candidates, semicolon. As you know, we do not rest until we take, I'm sorry, what? As you know, we do not rest until we take care of every one of them.
I didn't appreciate that part, honestly. that part, Eric was getting inside my head in a way that I was like, dude, I don't have that opinion. I'm sorry. But I do not know that, Eric. I think Eric himself personally really wants to do everything right. He seems genuine to me, but the behemoth organization, on the other hand, has made some decisions that do not lead me to that conclusion.
It's also an organization that generally takes itself very literally, right? So for Eric to point out that we do not rest until we take care of every one of them, it's just not true. You have to go to bed if you want to help them. You gotta be rested. Anyways, thanks, Eric.
Maybe we should read this next one. Okay, so now we have back and forth between an actual affected student.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Which I started getting rumors of this from students before LSAC actually, got out there with the email to the test prep community. But so the first email that you got here was, hey, Ben. This was on the 29th, by the way. So Wednesday. Hey, Ben, I took your live DC class for the March LSAT. I ended up taking the June Flex and got a 165. My PTs were higher, 168 to 170. So I took the July Flex. As the subject alludes to, we don't have the subject of, don't have the subject of Nick's email. But anyway, as the subject alludes to, LSAC lost my July Flex. I felt confident on how I performed and thought I did well. Consequently, I decided that was going to be my last test. I also started a full-time job. I haven't studied since the week leading into the July test, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on potentially retaking in August. This, given I haven't studied at all since the beginning of July and won't have much time to study in the future. I don't want to risk my score going down, obviously, which is why I'm hesitant to retake. Looking forward to hearing from you. Best, Nick.
Now, I don't think my email is here, but just for anyone who's curious, I told Nick that the LSAT, the skill-based test, so once he starts studying just a little bit, it should come back pretty quickly.
It's not that hard to get back on the horse.
Mm-hmm.
Still, circumstances, he's got a job now.
Yeah, you're done. He wanted to check this thing off of his list.
The fact that they make people sign up so goddamn far in advance, and the fact that they take 3 weeks to get the scores out. How the hell, Ben, do they not have some sort of a validation to just check to make sure they have everybody's responses? Why did it take 3 weeks after the test for them to realize that they had lost Nick's score?
That part is confusing to me. We've had this problem in the Demon in the past, and we now have a little bot that like checks, so you can know instantly whether there are problems.
And we're a tiny little nothing compared to the Law School Admission Council, but we administer tests all the time online and don't lose people's scores. And we've only existed for like a year.
Yeah.
Like, what? Email number 2. Hi, all. I'm still waiting for an email from LSAC. I know because they called me yesterday afternoon to tell me there was a technological error and that they lost my score. The lady I spoke with said that I would receive an email last night. Nothing yet. Still no score. Here's essentially the story. I checked Tuesday night on my LSAC account where the score would be and noticed a special note under the July Flex that said, quote, score validity review. This was the first time this popped up, and it was only about a day that it had been on there before I noticed it. I called LSAC on Wednesday morning and spoke with the representative who told me that he, quote, didn't know what that meant and that, quote, my score was still scheduled to be released on time and that, quote, everything seemed okay with my test. I wasn't satisfied with that answer, so I called again around lunchtime and spoke to someone else. She also did not know what that meant, but told me she would have someone call me back with more information. A couple hours later, someone from LSAC did call me back, and I spoke with a rep who confirmed my score was lost. To make up for this, she/LSAC offered a full refund for the July 4 test, or for the July test, 4 free score reports, and then either a spot in the August test or a coupon for a future test. As I said, she said I would receive an email from LSAC later in the evening last night, but instead we all received emails about LSAC's diversity events. As I'm sending this, I'm still waiting for an email from LSAC, and I will forward you whatever they send, if they send it. I do plan on calling them again in a bit to confirm that I want to register for the August Flex. However, it would be nice if they offered a score preview, but that is wishful thinking. Everybody's just like asking for, score preview is a new thing that LSAC created. It's only for first-time test takers. You can pay extra to see your score before deciding whether you want to cancel. That does seem like a pretty good freebie to give somebody like Nick, who got totally screwed. Nick retook the test because he thought he could do better. He feels like he did do better. And then 3 weeks later, they tell him, we lost your score.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I wrote him back and I said, hey, Nick, just ask for it. And he said, I already did ask for it. And they said, no. So I don't understand. I don't understand why they're giving a full refund on the test. They're giving 4 free whatever reports. This is just another free service. It doesn't cost them anything. Just offer it to them. But it's substantively very helpful.
So then we do get the email from LSAC. Says, hi, in addition to reaching out by phone, I want to ensure you have information regarding your July LSAT-Flex score in email. In the course of our scoring process, we recently identified a technical issue affecting how your answers were transmitted into our system, which caused your answers not to store properly. Therefore, we are unable to provide you with a score at this time. We have tried multiple ways to recover your answers and will continue to investigate the issue in hopes of better news, but unfortunately, we cannot guarantee we will be able to provide a score for your July test. We apologize to you and other affected test takers. We know how frustrating this is and are very sorry this happened. We are working quickly to provide you with a free retake opportunity as early as next week, with scores available within a week or less. So now they added a new thing. Like they had first said, we'll let you have a spot in the August Flex. Mm-hmm. But now they're also saying, oh, actually, we'll let you take it earlier than that. We're going to make a special retake opportunity where the scores will come out on a reasonable time frame. they haven't actually done that yet. You know, Eric's email was like, as early as August, as early as the week of August 3rd, which by the way means no sooner than the week of August 3rd, which is only a few days from now, but it's still funny with the KG lawyer language. Providing a full refund of your July LSAT-Flex registration fee and 4 free law school reports, which cost $45, even though all it is an email to the schools with your score. I mean, there's no reason why it should cost anything. Should you prefer to take the free retest later, you can do so through the testing cycle ending April 21st. Please contact us immediately, blah, blah, blah. Sincerely, Candidate Services, Law School Admission Council. Okay. What do you think?
I don't know. I wish they would provide score preview. I mean, this stuff does happen.
Sure.
But yeah, the way I think overall they seem to be responding proactively. They're deflecting a little bit, obviously not taking full responsibility, but substantively they are trying to solve these problems and refund people. I just wish they would give them score preview. I don't understand why they don't do that.
That would be a nice compensation. Also, none of these issues would be nearly as big of a deal if they would shorten the amount of time in advance that you have to register. And if they would shorten the amount of time it takes to get your damn score back. I mean, I can't stop saying this. When you take the GMAT, you get your score instantly, literally in an instant. It says, do you want to see your score? You click yes, and it shows you your score. So if GMAT can do that, then why the fuck can't the LSAT do that? Give me, I mean, or at least give me a reason why. It makes no sense. I mean, because they didn't make the test computer adaptive and because they, you know, made a bunch of choices, but still, like, fix it. Just fix it. You could just give the score right away. There's no reason why you're not doing that already. And if you did that, if it was the kind of thing where you could register and take the test a week from now, and then see your score instantly, then these issues would not be a big deal. But they would go away. Yeah. When the whole thing takes 2 months. No, more than 2 months, Ben. It takes 6 weeks to register plus 3 weeks to get your score. So it's, you know, that the minimum is the minimum is 9 weeks. That's if you register on the deadline. It's going to be 9 weeks till you get your score. That's why these things end up being so fucking dramatic.
Yeah. And if you miss that deadline by a week or anything like that, you're looking at the next cycle. So now you're looking at 2 more months on top of that.
It's like they could save themselves all kinds of hassles. I'm sure that this would benefit LSAC so much to just, you got to change that system. It just makes no sense. The reason why you're having constant phone calls and emails from hysterical students, because I'm sure they also get phone calls and emails from hysterical students who are like, wait, it's the middle of July. What do you mean I missed the registration for the LSAT that's in late August? Or whatever, you know, it's like, well, yeah, you missed the deadline because the deadline's 6 goddamn weeks before the test. And so I'm sure then they call LSAC and cry and complain and try to get special treatment. And like, okay, well, I don't know, get your shit together. Okay. You want to take this next one?
Sure. Yep. Hi, Ben. I hope you're doing well. I wanted to let you know I received my July Flex score today. Okay, so this was a successful saving. 177, exclamation point. A 25-point increase from my diagnostic. I'm flipping out. 3 exclamation points. Wow, yeah, we see that in your writing. Anyway, thank you so much for your help. It was a long road, but strategy prep, the demon, and the podcast got me there in the end. Special shout out to Nathan for showing up in my brain during the test. Quote, make the argument win. Okay, I'll wrap up. Please feel free to read this on the podcast if you'd like. And thank you again. I might follow up with a personal statement to shred, but I haven't decided if my skin is thick enough. Smiley emoji. Sarah. Yes, Sarah, I hope we convinced you to send it in. We're looking forward to, well, you could look at it as we're shredding it, but if it needed to be shredded, then it's better to get it shredded than
Yeah.
to
Also,
submit it.
your skin will only get thicker from, the lashing that we're going to give you. So yeah,
Yep.
send it in. Whatever. It's fine. We're only trying to help. So yeah, we'll rip it up, but it'll get better. So do it.
There you go. Yeah.
25-point increase from the diagnostic pen.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I've heard people be devastated about starting with a 152. People are so embarrassed to admit. You get them on the phone, first time you talk to them, they're like, "Oh, I took I did take a diagnostic, but it was bad. I can't. No, it was really, really low." And then you finally get it out of them. They finally spit it out 152, and I'm always just like, "Oh, nice. We can work with that."
Yeah.
Low 150s, high 140s, even mid 140s, even low 140. I'm not like terrified of a 142. 152 is awesome. And Sarah went from 152 to a 177, 99.9th percentile score. Sarah ended up with after starting with a 152.
I just realized she kicked my ass by 2 points. I started with a 153 and I ended up with a 176. She started 1 point below me and went 1 point above me. All right,
you
Sarah.
did not have the benefit of studying with the LSAT team in Penn. So
this is true.
She had an unfair advantage.
True. Yeah. This is like those old running times, right? That were based on like shoes that didn't have the spikes in them or something. There you go.
All right. Lots of big increases we heard this cycle, especially because of the demon, but we can just let the students speak for themselves. We don't need to pat ourselves on the back on our back any more than we already do. This interview is awesome, Ben. I think it's time to probably play it. It's about 50 minutes. You want to sum up at all what we talked about on the interview with Aaron?
Bottom line, there are problems with the law school ranking system, and people need to know what they're getting into before they go to law school. I don't know.
Yeah, you will hear me at a complete loss for words multiple times during the episode or during the interview where I'm just completely stuck and can't speak because I'm so devastated by the system. Aaron is genuinely doing his best to try to work to fix the system. But it's a little dark. Anyway, Aaron's a great guy, and I think you guys will enjoy the interview. So here's our interview with Aaron Taylor of AccessLex. With us today, we have Aaron Taylor. Aaron is the executive director for the AccessLex Center for Legal Education Excellence in Washington, D.C. He was previously a member of the law school faculty at St. Louis University School of Law, dean of admissions and scholarships at University of Arkansas School of Law, and admissions director for Harvard's Graduate School of Education. Prior to that, he practiced ethics law in Washington, D.C. He received a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from North Carolina A&T State University, a JD from Howard University, and a doctorate in higher education leadership and policy from Vanderbilt University. He's also an alumnus of the Harvard University Administrative Fellowship Program. Wow, Aaron, that's a lot. Welcome to the show. Where are you, Aaron?
Thank you.
In D.C.?
Yeah, well, Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Yeah, D.C. Metro.
All right. Ben has some clue where that is. I don't really.
Yep.
Great community.
A little bit northeast, maybe, of where I am, I think.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly.
Cool. So, Aaron, can you reached out to us? Can you tell us a bit about your role at AccessLex and why you took that position? And I guess if you wanted to start with anything else, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, I lead the Center for Legal Education Excellence with AccessLex. And in the center, what we do is we conduct rigorous, actionable research into legal education. And we mainly focus in the areas of the bar exam and student diversity. And I emphasize actionable because we don't conduct research just because it's interesting to do. We conduct research with a goal and a purpose of informing policies, practices, procedures, the things that law schools actually do that impact law students. And then we also fund research of other people through our grant programs, and we engage in policy advocacy as well around issues that are relevant to law students, including, of course, student loan policy. So there's a whole lot we do in the center, but it is really focused on adding to the knowledge base of legal education, what it does, what it doesn't do, how it serves the students, and then using that information to actually impact the lives of students through the policies and practices of law schools.
I guess I'm just curious, how have things changed over the past 6 months?
A whole lot has changed, right, with the bar exam. Though of course, much of that is driven by conditions and factors that are well outside of our control, namely the COVID crisis, and even the Black Lives Matter movement that has been re-energized in a lot of ways. And so what we tried to do is be a resource to law schools as well as to state bar associations in the form of just providing good information about what could work, also advocating for test takers. You know, our position generally is the way that states should handle this, and it's not an easy situation to be in. So I don't cast aspersions on anybody or anything that's having to deal with this situation, but their focus should be on what's best for the test takers, and that's their health and wellness, as well as giving them the opportunity to begin their career as lawyers as soon as they can. I mean, that's the whole premise of them going to law school, the vast majority of them. And so that's basically what we've been doing, but much of it is just us sitting back with everybody else, really just in awe of how different things have transpired. And I mean, you know, what my hope is that this will prompt us to really consider some alternative avenues into the profession that don't necessarily flow through the traditional bar exam.
So I've been hearing on other podcasts, the Above the Law podcast had an episode recently about diploma privilege. Do you have a position on that?
Well, you know, it's a real option, and it's something that should be seriously considered by every jurisdiction. We've had diploma privilege in Wisconsin for over 100 years, at least for graduates who graduate from Wisconsin law schools. And
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but sorry, what's diploma privilege? What is this?
So essentially, it's if you graduate from law school and get your diploma, you're admitted to the bar, subject to, of course, the character and fitness background check that every person being considered for bar admission has to go through. But there's no separate exam that you take post law school. Your diploma from law school is your entry into the profession, essentially.
And this would happen. So certain schools have opted into this, and it's for that state only, I'm assuming.
Right. So Wisconsin is the only state pre-COVID crisis that had diploma privilege. And it's essentially, if you graduate from University of Wisconsin Law School or Marquette Law School, you get admission to the Wisconsin bar. If you came from another law school, you had to take the Wisconsin bar exam. But now post-COVID, with all the issues with, you know, the risk of having an in-person bar exam, you've had a few states, Utah, Washington, there's another I'm forgetting, who have basically adopted emergency diploma privilege for basically this class only. It's not a policy that's intended to be permanent, but it's really just something that's being done given the unprecedented and chaotic nature of this crisis.
Got it. So basically only one state and 2 law schools allowed this before, and now some states have already started to allow
a few, right?
And maybe some people are pushing for more. I mean, I feel like we're kind of digging into the weeds here of like the bar exam and, you know, ways for people to get into the profession. But can we step back for a second, Aaron, and just talk about like, what's the big goal? What's your number one goal as an organization and as you as an individual within that organization?
Yeah, so, you know, we exist to make legal education better for law students. I mean, that's our fundamental bottom line on that. And by better, we mean more efficient, more effective, more equitable. We have a strategic plan that's aligned around 4 broad objectives. One is to increase bar pass rates. We want every law school in the country to have a bar pass rate, first-time bar pass rate of at least 70%. And right now, you'll probably have about 40, 45 schools that'll fall under that in any given year. We want the diversity of graduating classes, those folks who are entering into the profession. We want the racial ethnic diversity to reflect the country, to reflect the demographics of the nation. We want law students to be exposed to rigorous personal finance education, financial literacy, while they're in school. So when they go out into the real world and they're managing their loans and their mortgages and all of that, they know how to do that, as well as if they're managing the property of other people as their lawyers. And then lastly, we want data that's important to legal education, whether it's relevant to someone considering if law school is right for them, or whether it's relevant to a researcher who just wants to do something or research a particular issue. We want it to be centralized, usable, and accessible, because we believe that better information drives better decision making.
Okay, so I heard, so these are your 4 goals. One is to increase bar passage rates. 2 is to
diversity.
Focus on diversity, specifically of graduates, right? So the graduating class reflects the society at large. 3 is, oh shoot, I already forgot.
Financial literacy.
Financial literacy, which, and you're focusing on post-graduation.
Well, not really. We're targeting at law students with the idea that they will leave law school with these skills that'll help them throughout their life.
Got it. I mean, when you're saying that, that's something I think we would both, Nathan and I would agree is necessary, but I almost feel like it has to take place earlier, because some of the decisions that you make, right? Once you're in law school, you've already committed to loans that are huge, and maybe you shouldn't have committed to them in the first place, right?
I mean, financial education in this country is horrible, right? And it's pretty ironic given the role that money plays in practically everything we do in this country. It's something that kindergartners, frankly, should be exposed to and throughout your education, K-12 education. But what we're doing is we're making sure, at least trying to make sure, that when they do leave law school and the stakes do become particularly high for them, that they'll have that insight that they should have gotten years and years earlier.
Okay. They could add a financial literacy section to the LSAT, make people understand what they're doing with their student loans before they actually are able to enroll in law school.
Well, we have our student loan calculator on our website right now, where people can come in and plug in numbers, and it doesn't just do simple math of 50,000 plus 50 is 100. It actually tells them this is what the monthly payment will look like, and this is the grand amount you will actually pay back by the time you're done. And so, and that's accessible to anybody and everybody, whether you're going to law school or not. So, so there are some resources, but our MAX program, which is our financial literacy program, that begins in orientation in the first year and continues on through the end.
So my preference would be that people go to law school for free. They get a full ride scholarship plus a stipend, right? But for those who remain unconvinced, I'm curious. I'm on your webpage right now, accesslex.org. So where can they find this tool so they can at least get a sense of how much money they're really?
Well, the easiest way to get to it probably is just to put AccessLex Student Loan Calculator in the search box. Yeah, it'll take it right to it.
Okay. My worry about that is that you show people, hey, by the time you borrow and pay back these loans, you're going to have paid $300,000.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything.
It's
to them.
fake.
Is that what you're...
It's not fake. It's a real number. It's a number that is so big that they can't understand it.
Yeah.
And they also think that they're going to make more money as lawyers than they actually are.
Yeah. So that's why the monthly payment piece is important, because I do think the monthly payment does make it a bit more real, because they can compare it to their car note. They can compare it to their rent. They can do those things. But a lot of this really is the individual aspiring law student just doing their own due diligence about getting good information about what lawyers do. That's a big question that seems to be unclear on the parts of a lot of people. And B, how much do lawyers get paid? And there's a whole lot of good information out there that'll show, sure, you have the big law firm jobs. Those are rare, that pay very well. Most lawyers are going to make between $40,000 and $70,000 fresh out of school. And so, that should put it into real perspective. again, for people who do their due diligence.
But then you have the law schools out there talking about, oh, well, the average salary for lawyers is $100,000.
Well, it is. But, again, that just goes to how when I was an admission officer, I can tell you the last thing I wanted to do was have a disgruntled student passing me in the hallway every day. And so what I would tend to do is I would actually err on the side of being just a little more careful in how I advise an individual student. So if someone came to me and said, my goal in life is to work at a big law firm, I would ask them, how would you feel if you graduated from school and that didn't happen? Like, would you think law school was worth it? And if they said, oh yeah, because I can go on and blah, 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 I'll say, okay, now we can talk. But if they say no, it would be a complete waste, I would advise them against not necessarily going to law school generally, but going to the schools where I worked, because we didn't place a lot of people in those settings. And so, that really just goes to admission officers carry a lot of weight, and they have a responsibility to be judicious in the selling that they do, because it is a salesperson's job as well. They have to be judicious about that. And I think in the aftermath of the downturn, particularly with the troubles that law schools got into with the employment data being fuzzy, if not fraudulent, and all of those things, I really do think most admission officers are being more judicious about how they give out information regarding what the payoff looks like.
Let's talk about goal number one. 70% first-time bar passage rate for all ABA law schools. How many ABA law schools do we have to shut down to reach that goal?
Well, I don't know how many we have to shut down. The ABA has a new bar standard. I guess it's about a year old now, standard 316. And it focuses on eventual bar passage, and eventual is basically 2 years after the class graduates. I believe the number is 75% or 70% have to pass the bar exam. So that'll determine who or what schools need to be shut down, because that's an accreditation standard. And if your accreditation is stripped, you can't collect federal financial aid. So that'll make that determination. We don't make any determinations on who should go and who should stay. What we do is provide resources for schools to serve their students better.
I mean, I'm not asking you to, swing the axe on the law schools area. I guess I was asking more for your opinion. I'm in California right now, and boy, in California, to get to a first-time bar passage rate of 70%, how many schools do we even have in California that have that? Maybe 5? I don't know.
Yeah, but a lot of that depends on the cut score in the state. I mean, the cut score will influence bar pass rates more than, frankly, anything we could ever do as an organization. And cut scores are really just subjective numbers that someone said, this is the number we're going to put here. And so, there's a whole systematic aspect to this. We're just one part of it, and we're trying to leverage the piece that we have some sway over. But there's a whole big world out here. And, when we talk about, the idea of a school's merit or right to remain open being dependent on something that fundamentally is in some ways just made up, it kind of becomes a tricky conversation. And so I think what we've been advocating that every jurisdiction does and what schools do is look at their bar exam, assess the extent to which their bar exam actually does protect the public by telling us who's fit to practice law and who isn't. There are very few jurisdictions that have actually done that. California is actually in a process of doing it right now. And so until we get a sense of what this cut score means in the grand scheme of protecting the public from people who should not be practicing law, then again, the conversation of who deserves to be open is just it's a tricky thing.
It's such a weird question. The public needs protection from essentially what? Lawyers who don't know some things about certain areas of the law. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like these issues are resolved best in the marketplace. You get a bunch of negative Yelp reviews and people say, okay.
Well, on some level, I think you're right. However, the role that lawyers play and the power that lawyers have, does, I think, requires some level of inquiry into whether or not someone should be practicing law. Now, is that a traditional bar exam? That's surely not the only way in my mind. Is one way, but it's surely not the only way. And but there should be some inquiry beyond, just pure go to the marketplace and see what happens, because those are individual lives that are impacted every time, and they don't often have much redress if a lawyer screws them over.
But I mean, the law
yeah.
schools are graduating these people in the first place, right? So the bar is there then to protect the public from the people that the law schools have already for 3 years allegedly taught how to practice law.
That is the premise. That is
so,
absolutely the premise. And again, the way the exams are structured and where the cut scores are set, they are not really tied to this whole idea of fitness to practice law. And so, there are fundamental questions about the role of the bar exam. And frankly, that's the upside of all this COVID stuff, is that it's requiring states to get away from just the tradition of doing something because they've always done it. And
it's helped them, right? It's protectionism, right? It's like, we're here to protect the public. Really, we're here to protect the number of attorneys coming into the state, including attorneys, even if they may not be as intellectually savvy to pass the bar.
Yeah.
When you put them in charge of a narrow piece of the law, they could become a badass and crush it, right? Like, I don't know all this stuff about whatever, but I'm really good at X, Y, Z, whatever that is.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And one of, my really pet peeves with the bar exam is that they tend to be closed book. And I'm like, when do lawyers ever have to know the law off the top of their head? I used to work for the agency in DC that investigates allegations of ethical misconduct by members of the DC bar. And we had a saying that if a lawyer practices law the way they were required to take the bar exam, they're guaranteed to have a complaint before our office. And it just really gets to this idea that lawyers always have research that they can refer to and resources. So why, make the bar exam closed book? I mean, that's one of the host of complaints I have and issues I have with the way the traditional bar exam is set up.
Aaron, funny story here.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, this just reminded me. When I took the bar in Virginia, we had a lunch break, right? The written portion. And I went and I ate lunch in my car because we were out somewhere in just the middle of Virginia. Mm-hmm. And I listened to an audio recording of some example questions and model answers. And I think I got like through 3 of them while I was eating lunch. And when I got back from the break, I think my last 2 questions, or 2 of my last essay questions, were spot on to the examples I had just listened to. And I was like, oh, thank God. Like, this is wonderful.
You were meant to pass.
The Ben Olson cheated on the bar exam back in 2000, whatever.
Now, did you have to dress up for the Virginia bar? I've heard you have to wear a suit and tie or something.
Yeah, we had a suit and tie inside of a large, gym area with sneakers. It was awkward.
Hilarious.
I want to bring it back to the students, because I think that's what all 3 of us really care about. We need to figure out a way to protect students. Protect the public. Who cares about the public? Let's protect the students, because the students, our students, our LSAT students, law school applicants generally tend to be early 20s, pretty naive, pretty broke, especially when we start talking about people of color. They probably haven't had lawyers in their family. They don't really know what they're getting themselves into. And so I think our primary concern here is to protect the students from, 30 years ago when law school cost $5,000 a year, maybe you're not going to ruin your financial future. Today, when law school costs $50,000 a year, you are going to ruin your financial future if you don't end up with a successful legal career after law school. So, it's really the law schools that are taking advantage of the student loan system that we have. There's all these perverse incentives that are set up. So the law schools, presumably, if you had held them to some standard of bar passage, then I guess you could say, well, as long as you're admitting students and who can pass and preparing
Right.
them in such a way that they can pass, then okay, you're putting them in a position to have a successful career. But there seems to also be some abdication of responsibility with the way that system is set up, where the law schools now, they can say, oh, you didn't pass the bar. Well, I mean, the bar is there to protect the public. And, if you're, so we did what we can do. And I don't know. And, the kid, meanwhile, signed on the dotted line, and now they owe $250,000 and can't pass the bar. I mean,
Yeah.
it just seems like an intractable problem. What do we do practically? What do we do?
Yeah, well, of course they have the ABA accreditation standards that dictate your bar pass has to be a certain level. So that's one way of trying to hold schools responsible for their students. And
Wait,
I can
what
tell
is that
you,
level?
like I said, I believe it's 75% in 2 years. So within 2 years of the class graduating, at least 75% of the class has to have passed the bar exam.
And if you fail that, you get put on probation?
Right,
or
you
law
get
school?
put on probation, and then you get another year or another cycle, I should say, for your next class to basically meet the standard. And then after that, you potentially could lose your accreditation. So it's a brand new rule. So it hasn't run its course in terms of maturing enough for someone to be brought up.
So we don't know if it has any bite.
Huh?
Yeah. We don't know if it has any bite yet.
We don't know yet. Yeah, because again, no one has been brought up yet. But in another 2 or 3 years, we'll begin to see how much bite it actually has. But that's the premise behind it. And so this is what I think can be done by law school specifically. Reduce the risk of going, because my idea of access is messy. You're going to have some that come in and they're slam dunks and you're like, wow, I knew that person had it in them. You're going to have other folks who come in and they flame out quickly. And so you reduce the risk by stop awarding full scholarships or half scholarships or third scholarships, whatever they are, to people with no financial need. People who don't need the loan or don't need the scholarship. And provide it on a need basis. Because what happens is, if you're a student, you're coming in, you have no financial resources behind you, with the exception of the student loan that you can get. And I'm a complete advocate of robust access-based student loan system. So unless you're a student, that's all you have, and you're borrowing every dime, your risk obviously is much higher than if you came in, got a full ride because you have no money, and then all you borrowed was maybe the living expenses and things of that nature. So in my mind, that's something that's pretty straightforward. I won't call it easy, but it's something that's pretty straightforward that law schools can do, because they don't have crystal balls. They don't know exactly how people are going to do once they get in the building, but you can absolutely impact the level of risk that this student takes by reducing the amount that this student has to borrow to attend.
What incentive would schools have to do that? To switch from a merit-based to a need-based system simply, because right now they're using the merit-based system to basically buy their ranking.
Absolutely. There are no incentives right now, at least no tangible ones. There are a whole bunch of them of, appeal to your conscience, appeal to, your sense of being a good citizen, appeal to this idea that these are real people that you're inducing to come to your school and you want them to have a good outcome. But the system of prestige and rankings and exclusion, frankly, that legal education is built upon, it doesn't incentivize any type of altruism when it comes to awarding scholarships. A lot of times the view is that person should be happy that they got in.
Yeah, that's how the whole system is built. They make people feel like it's such an amazing privilege to be able to go to this school and pay us $50,000. Meanwhile,
now, I will say,
other people are going for free, that you're paying for their education,
you're subsidizing
and
their
in many
attendance.
cases their rent.
Yep. I will say there are schools that intentionally keep their costs low, and they're access schools like North Texas. I think their tuition is around $16,000 a year. You have most of the HBCU law schools have very low tuition because they're public mainly, but then also they know who their students are and they want to reduce that risk of the investment. But then on the flip side, you have other access-based schools, and I won't name any names per se, but they do have a high tuition model where, you know, they say, hey, we'll take all comers, and essentially it's up to you whether you make it. And so those are the ones I have real issues with. The other ones, if your tuition is reasonable and you're just taking a chance on someone who may actually become a great student and may be a great lawyer, then that's I have no problem with that. I actually encourage that.
All right. So what do you tell potential applicants?
In what context?
I don't know. Like you meet someone, they say, "Hey, I want to go to law school."
Yeah.
You say, "Okay, but watch out for anything." What do you?
So the first thing I tend to do is basically point them to resources where they can learn more, because what I find, at least with the folks who reach out to me or who I come across, they really have no real information about legal education. They know they want to be a lawyer. They've admired lawyers for long periods of time, but they don't have much information about how they go from layperson to lawyer. And so I point them to resources, particularly some of ours, AccessLex, that they can use to learn more information. But then what I do on a bottom line level is I tell them not all lawyers go to court. Most of them don't. Not all lawyers work in big law firms. Most of them don't. And most lawyers make between $40,000 and $70,000 fresh out of school. And so if that's okay with you, and for many it is, for many it's not really about money, then I encourage them to go forth. Then also what I do is I apprise them of the student loan options, the income-based repayment, and also public service loan forgiveness, because that can really impact what they end up paying on the back end, irrespective of what they come out owing. And so I try to give them a full range of what the real picture looks like, but then also give them some options to consider if they go in, pay a whole lot of money, and it doesn't quite pan out the way that they had hoped.
Nathan?
I just feel so stuck. I don't feel like progress is being made on this issue. If anything, I feel like it's getting worse. Ben and I have been yelling on this podcast for 7 years now, or whatever it is, about, I mean, the tagline on the show is literally "Don't pay for law school." The reason why the tagline on the show is "Don't pay for law school" is because you don't have to. You can always just go to a slightly lower ranked school and take one of these tuition scholarships. And when you do, you're going for free and you're competing against less qualified colleagues in your class. And those people are paying full price and you're not. And until we fix that broken system, I don't think there's any possible way. I mean, I suppose, do law schools, I don't think they currently do. Do they have to publish data, or should they have to publish data about the indebtedness of various different segments of their graduating class? Because if it became, you know, if they had to show people,
right,
hey, our Blacks and Latinxes in our class graduate with 5 times as much debt as the white kids do, then, you know, maybe that would be like, if you put the sunlight on that, and it would become obvious how unconscionable it is.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Ben and I make it worse, because we just try to convince all of our students and all of our listeners, we feel like it's our responsibility to do so. Don't pay. Like, why would you pay tuition? You don't have to pay tuition. That's the system. You don't have to. All the law schools are charging everyone a different price. And that price is zero in many, many cases, or close to zero in many cases. Also, and I'm sorry for yelling at you, Aaron. You're certainly not responsible for the problem.
I get it.
That's what I do on the show, is yell. But what are they possibly doing with $50,000 a year worth of tuition? Where does that money go? Because it is not going to actual benefits for the students. I mean, what do they do with that money?
I would say post-enrollment downturn, more of it is going to students. The bulk of it is going to students, because now, with enrollments being so low, central universities are now having to subsidize the law school budgets. I'll give you an example. When I the year before 2010, the year before I joined the faculty at St. Louis, there were about 300 first-year students who came in that year. By 2013, the enrollment was about 130. So that's a whole different budget picture. When there were 300 students in the class, the law school was sending money out to other departments or to Central University, and it was being distributed to other departments that were not revenue generating. When that thing flipped and there were only 130 students, the flow became reversed. The Central University started subsidizing the law school. And then what also has happened over the last maybe 10, definitely 5 years, is student support, particularly in the areas of academic support and bar prep. Those have been fortified and beefed up at a lot of law schools. And of course, that costs a whole lot of money to hire people and have programming and offer, this free thing and that free thing, or free in terms of, a la carte. But the overall point is, right now, I do think most of the tuition is going to support students. That hasn't always been the case. And it's a direct reflection of just the enrollment dip that we saw that began in 2011, and we're still kind of at the bottom of that.
I guess I want to push back a little bit on that. I mean, when you say it's going to support students, you mean pay salaries for
of course,
people
salaries
who are
are
there.
part of it.
Yeah, which is certainly part of it. I'm not saying law professors shouldn't get paid.
Yeah.
But administrators and law professors, they got a pretty good gig.
Law professors definitely do. The best job I've ever had. And the part of what made that the best job was I was able to directly impact real students practically every day. And that's a part of it that a lot of people don't talk about. You really are guiding people in a very impactful part of their life. But it's a great job. And so, yeah, it's a sweet gig. Administrators, I wouldn't necessarily say that their gigs are great. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But yeah, I always considered it a privilege, whether I was on the administrative side or the faculty side, or even as a student. I always considered it a privilege to be able to work in a law school setting. And yeah, I never didn't feel thankful for the students who were coming in paying money for me to get a salary. So, but again, these people serve students. So you have to pay people to provide the academic support. You have to pay people to teach the courses. Salaries aren't per se bad. And one of the downsides, I mean, it was necessary, but one of the downsides of the downturn was you had a whole lot of folks who got laid off, particularly administrators. You had a whole lot of faculty who got phased out because the budget just couldn't support them. So, again, post downturn, I think it's a much more efficient operation and a much less gratuitous operation than it was previous to that.
I have this image in my head, and I don't know which guest I got this from. It may be as long ago as Zachary Kalo, but which was like episode 8 for us. But I remember someone talking about this idea of, or maybe it was much more recent, but there's 2 models for law school, right? One was more sort of the like trade school, and one is sort of like the Harvard model of like having expensive faculty and taking a much more theoretical approach. And since all these lower tier schools decided to follow the higher tier model, it required hiring professors who graduated from, the top programs in the world and compensating them with higher salaries. And so you have a lot of these lower tier law schools that really have no need for this expensive professor base, maybe, right? But they have it anyways because that's the model they decided to follow. I wonder how much of that is still affecting, how expensive it is for students to go to these schools, because the schools feel like, oh, well, I have to hire these professors and they have to be from the top 5 schools, which means we have to pay them a lot.
Well, and we just covered I guess it's still a fact that US News, one of the metrics they use for ranking is how much money you spend. So the more money they spend, the better for their ranking. So the more money they charge, the more money they spend, then the better for their ranking.
And there's so many ways to game that calculation. But I was kind of laughing earlier because the idea that, a lot of these schools chose it isn't really how it went. They were kind of forced to choose it by the accreditation system. The accreditation system drives a lot of this Harvard model, this Langdellian model, as it's often called, of legal education. And you do have a whole lot of schools that are trying to do things differently. In other words, they don't require faculty to engage in a whole bunch of theoretical research, and do a lot of publishing. They're much more focused.
We just don't need it.
Oh, well, yeah, we still need it, and there'll be enough law faculty writing articles, forever.
Well, yeah, Harvard. You guys could take care of the theory and figure it out. The rest of us could just chill.
But those schools are very teacher centered. But they still are operating within a larger framework of accreditation requirements and incentives. And then also, again, this idea of prestige and elitism that incentivizes the Harvard, Yale, Stanford professor background with, professor has published X number of articles in X number of years. That's still the overarching model, and a lot of schools would love to be freed from it. But again, the accreditation system doesn't necessarily allow for you to completely divest your institution of the model.
And it's what makes the U.S. News and World Report ranking system capable of including all law schools in it, right? Because law schools are so homogeneous, and they have to be homogeneous because of basically the requirements, right? The ABA requirements.
And the ones that depart in any substantive way get dinged by U.S. News. Those are the so-called unranked schools. Those are the renegade schools in a lot of ways. And they get completely punished for not buying completely into the system. And U.S. News, probably a year ago, and I'm not sure the status of it right now, but they were talking about adding a professor publication standard or indicator to their calculation. And so now it's an idea of how many times your professor's articles have been cited and things of that nature. And so you really, again, dig in deeply on this Harvard model of legal education when you have a whole lot of other schools that are like, no, we're concerned with educating our students. Research isn't that important to us in that way.
How do we get people off of it seems like U.S. News is responsible for half of this whole problem. How do we get people off of those rankings? Also, I'm curious, do we know who owns U.S. News?
I think it's privately owned, actually. I don't think it's publicly traded company. I think it's privately owned. And so you asked me a good question. And I'm the only person in the world, possibly, that you would hear actually say U.S. News is a scapegoat. And the reason why I say that is because U.S. News is essentially it's a means for legal educators to satisfy their already elitist notions of status, and I'm better than this school and that school, I'm better than that professor, but it gives them kind of a scapegoat to say, but no, I don't want to do that, or I don't consider myself better or my school better. Well, to me, the proof is in the pudding. You aren't mandated to complete the U.S. News questionnaire. So you choose to do it year after year for a reason. And don't get me wrong, I understand it's very difficult for one school to just say, I'm not going to participate in it, because they'll have to deal with angry central administration. They'll have to deal with angry alumni. They'll have to deal with angry students who will say, why did the ranking go down when I chose the school because of the ranking? But if 50 law schools said, we're no longer going to participate, that would severely impact, particularly if they were top 100 law schools, that would severely impact U.S. News's influence.
Yeah,
but
we need Harvard, Stanford, Yale to do it. If they did it at the top,
they can absolutely do it, and it wouldn't impact them at all because they're Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, right?
But they might impact people's concern for the rankings. If all of a sudden Harvard, Yale, Stanford were unranked, then we would see how absurd the whole ranking system is. But other schools aren't going to want to do it because all of a sudden they go from, you're UCLA and you're just right outside the top 14. And now all of a sudden you're unranked. Well, of course, they're not going to want to do that because they attract students.
How about school number 79? It seems to me that there are some schools that U.S. News is not working for at all.
I don't know.
So, Harvard and Yale, I can almost see, okay, if they did it, it would be great, but it would require just pure charity from them to not participate. There are other schools where it would be a tangible benefit if they banded together and just refused to do it.
I
But like I
disagree,
said,
Aaron.
I think U.S. News is an outlet and it's a scapegoat for their own notions of elitism and hierarchy.
The thing is, I got the question in class last night. I have students and I get this question constantly. People asking me, hey, I'm considering going to this unranked school. What do you think? And they think that 79 is much better than unranked. And I'm like, listen,
Right.
Anything outside the top 50, maybe anything outside the top 25, they're all fine. They're all regional law schools that are fine. There's no difference. There should be, if there's going to be any ranking at all, it should be like 1 through 10 and then everything else. And instead people like, because students, how do we educate students? How do we educate listeners? I'm sorry, guys, 79 and unranked are the exact same thing.
Yeah. And the regional school point is a good one. So when I was at Arkansas, Little Rock, I think U.S. News was still ranking up to 150 at that time. And we were probably around 115 or something along those lines. And I could tell you, a graduate in Arkansas, a graduate coming out of Little Rock or Fayetteville would have a better chance of getting any law firm job in the state than someone coming from Harvard or Yale or anything along those lines. And that's because the alumni of those two schools were the people doing the hiring. And so the idea of, okay, you have national law schools to where the name is just going to take you wherever you want to go. And there's probably, like you said, 25 of them, I would say, maybe 30. After that, you have regional schools. Some regions are larger than others, but fundamentally, that school has its most name cachet and its most influence and its strongest alumni base within a certain geographic area of the school itself. And that is very important because if you wanted to work at a law firm in Arkansas and you chose to go to Columbia, that might not have been the best choice for you for a whole host of reasons.
Yeah. And it's even worse. Possibly the Harvard, Stanford, Yale lawyer might actually be able to walk into a law firm in Fayetteville and say, hey, I just moved here, yeah, here's my diploma from actual Yale. Like maybe it actually has a bit of cachet, but like, someone who they're at a allegedly national law school, like my alma mater, Hastings in San Francisco, you're not impressing anybody with oh, well, boy, we're ranked 60th in the country. That's much better than Little Rock or whatever. No way that's going to carry any weight in Arkansas.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a interesting notion. But I think the real danger of U.S. News is the extent to which it influences aspiring lawyers and prospective students. Outside of again, it being a scapegoat, I think for legal educators, I think it's very dangerous the way it influences the people who are looking to it to tell them where to go to school.
I've seen people turn down, $100,000 worth of tuition assistance to go to a law school that was ranked 40th instead of a law school that was ranked 60th.
Yep.
And they could have gone to the school that was ranked 60th for free. And they just, no, because no, and they're just immediately buying into the elitism and just we got to have somebody to look down on. If I go to the school that's ranked 60th, I won't be able to look down on anybody. So I have to go to this other school and sign my life away.
Yep. Yep.
An episode or two ago, we talked to Kyle McEntee, the executive director at Law School Transparency, and he floated the idea of buying, I guess his organization has floated the idea of buying the U.S. News and World Report rankings for whatever millions of dollars it would cost. And when we talked about it then, we talked about like, okay, well, what would happen if you just disbanded, you bought it, and then you just, blew it up? And it's like, well, other people would come in its place, right? And he's like, well, yeah, but that would take time and there wouldn't be any like obvious winner necessarily at first. But my thought is actually you buy it and then you slowly tweak it over time. Like, so you buy it and you keep everything the same so everybody just still buys into it. It still keeps its power. And then you start changing those numbers, because even small tweaks, which are all behind the scenes and, you know, no users know about them, but administrators know them so intimately, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh wait, that doesn't matter anymore. You know, cost or the amount of money spent per student doesn't matter.
The amount of books in my
Oh,
library no longer
Right.
matters. Oh,
yeah.
Right.
And then slowly like take control of that like ship and steer in a different direction.
I think your point is a good one about not disbanding it, because in the absence of information, something else will definitely step into that vacuum. And so it would have to be something still there to take up that space and to suck all the oxygen out of the room for some other more unscrupulous list. And so, yeah, you change the algorithm, you change the way that the rankings are computed. From a researcher standpoint, you actually make it valid and reliable, which it has no validity, no statistical reliability right now. And then hopefully you can get people to start thinking about what makes one law school better than the other in different ways. The problem is any kind of one size fits all list of law schools, you know, there are 200 or so in the country, will always be blunt. It will always be no more than just a superficial starting point. And so part of it too is to educate people how to contextualize these lists. No, I mean, no list will be good for everybody, and just how to contextualize it and say, look, you can go here to get general information about how schools are, like their reputations and what types of programming they have, but then use other resources to see the extent to which school A is a better fit for you than school B.
The problem I don't disagree with you, but the problem I have with like educating people is that it's a constant battle. And even when you educate someone all the way through the roof, right? Like they totally get it and they're sitting there and they're nodding their heads and they say, yeah, I know it's just a number, but it's still this number that like pulls at you. Even if you are on board, you recognize that everyone else is not on board. And so you, like, it feels to me, I wonder, I'm really curious what it would cost to buy that organization and then just steer the ship. And even if it's a shitty thing, because it's still just this number and it's still just this hierarchy, what if you started to realize though that those rankings were based more on something a little more substantive, you know, employment outcomes became much more central. And so then the schools were more free to say, hey, this is how we think we're going to accomplish employment outcomes. And we're like, okay, great. I don't care how you do it. As long as they're legit, they're not just JD Advantage. They're also, but whatever, right? You just move that ship. It's still going to have its flaws, but maybe less arbitrary. But
no, I completely agree. And, you know, the main criticism I have of U.S. News is much of the ranking, a plurality of the ranking is dependent on people's perceptions of your school without any real insight into the good things or bad things that your school is doing. And the sample that they get is horrible. I mean, if they actually pitched it as real research, it would almost be criminal for them to call it that. And so if you remove or at least lessen the influence of just these random subjective perceptions of reputation, the list possibly could be salvageable. But I think that's the main criticism of it, at least the one I have. It's useless in a lot of ways.
Can we move people over to, I mean, are you familiar with the above the law rankings, Aaron, or the resources on law school transparency? I mean, can we just start pointing people at least in that direction instead? Maybe Ben, maybe you and I need to take an oath to never talk about U.S. News. Like just to when people say, well, that's a top 14, we should go, huh? A what?
What does that mean?
What are you talking about? What do you mean top 14? By the way, there's 15 schools in the top 14 because they're tied. It's like, come on now. What are we even doing? Why do we do that? It wouldn't do any good if we did though. But
I think that not talking about it actually makes a lot of sense, because, you know, U.S. News is a product, but it also comes with a whole legend behind it. And it literally leaves no room for any other ranking system to take hold. And it's amazing. If you look at business school rankings, they have about 3 or 4 rankings that are, you know, more or less kind of considered to be equal in terms of influence and things of that nature. Legal education, Many have tried. They're good rankings, well, good as they go. Ranking system out there, like I think the above the law one is solid. The law.com, the AmLaw 100 ranking is pretty solid if you want to go into a law firm setting. Beyond that, but U.S. News is like, no, you get no space.
The schools reinforce it though too, because again, even not to pick on my alma mater, UC Hastings, which I always pick on, but they who their ranking has fallen over the last couple decades, but even they still point back to like, well, we're ranked 11th on the U.S. News best medical science law.
Yep.
Like, okay.
Yep.
They're still pointing. Everybody wants to hold up their little sign about it. And it's always U.S. News.
As I said, U.S. News is a scapegoat for our own instincts. We demonize it because we don't want to admit ourselves that we are really into what it's doing.
We've kept you already for almost an hour, Aaron. Is there anything that we are missing that we haven't talked about that we need to talk about?
Well, I mean, just generally, I want prospective law students, aspiring lawyers, to know that AccessLex is a resource for them. We have a whole host of pre-law resources, including one-on-one financial counseling with certified and accredited financial counselors. So, we're talking about the student loan piece. This is where they can get that information on the front end and throughout their law school experience. And so, just go to our website, see what we have, contact us if you have any questions. We're really here to stand in the void of other information to help prospective law students and then actual law students to make better decisions and have better experiences.
How can people reach you, Aaron?
My email is ataylor@accesslex.org. But if you just go on the website and email whoever you see on there first, they can point you to me.
Awesome. Ben, any final questions for Aaron?
This has been great. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
I appreciate you taking the time.
Me.
Thanks so much, Aaron.
Sounds good. Thank you all for having me.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good day. Nice to meet you.
All right. You too.
Okay, that was our interview with Aaron Taylor of AccessLex. Ben, anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up the show?
Nope.
Cool.
Oh, actually, there's one thing.
Yeah.
We are working on a scholarship calculator.
Oh.
And it's getting closer and closer to becoming public. So I'm just teasing that out there. I just met with Jackson yesterday. We went through some more details. Bottom line, you can put in your LSAT score and your GPA, and we're going to tell you what scholarship amount you should expect or probably expect from whatever school you want to apply to.
So we can continue to make the system even worse, as we were talking about in the interview with Aaron. But I mean, hey, all we can
Does
really...
it make it worse though? I actually
Right.
have to question you on that, because we're telling people what they can do today as opposed to what the system can do in 5 years.
Right.
And I think it will force change on the system in some ways.
Right. If everyone started insisting on a scholarship, then they would have to change their whole game, and they would have to just lower tuitions for everybody and say, sorry, we're not giving these scholarships anymore.
This isn't working.
I mean, but for now, what's been happening for the last 10 years, it seems like the scholarships have been just going more and more and more crazy, and they've been then charging people more and more and more, the people who are paying full price. Ultimately, and I regret, I wanted to bring this up with Aaron, but ultimately, I really wish that they would put a cap on how much people could borrow for law school tuition. I mean, that's the problem, right? It's unlimited. There's no limit to the amount that law schools can charge. They literally could charge $200,000 a year if they wanted to. And they are headed in that direction. I mean, it's not done anything except for keep going up for the entire time we've been in this business. It increases dramatically faster than inflation. And I think that maybe that's a thing that the ABA could come in and do and say, hey, we're going to or not the ABA, I guess that would be the federal government coming in and saying there's going to be a cap on, even if it was just a freeze on borrowing, you know, where there was at least like an upper limit that you could borrow.
Yeah.
Then that would immediately be the upper limit that schools would charge, because they rely on it's clear. And we've had multiple guests on the show who have said law schools would go out of business if they weren't able to access the federal loans.
What about just ending the federal loan program and requiring people to take loans from private lenders who would require much more assurances that the person's going to go to law school, be successful, and then turn around and be able to pay them?
Yeah, problem with that.
Right now, it's like this blank check.
You'd have to have another solution for diversity, obviously, right? Like the whole point of having this big student loan system that everybody can access, guaranteed by the federal government, is to make sure that poor people can go to law school. Banks generally don't loan money to poor people. Banks loan money to rich people. And so if you all of a sudden didn't have these loan programs available, then it would be poorer people. And we know what those poorer people tend to look like. They would not have access to law school anymore. It would dramatically change what law schools do, of course. Many of those poorer people are currently getting ripped off by the system anyway, right? Because they're signing for this federal guaranteed loan that then they end up just giving the money to law schools and not practicing law anyway. So I'm not saying that, I mean, your suggestion does, in many cases, it would be better that they didn't go to law school, right? But it would also decrease access in, for me, an intolerable way.
Well, maybe and maybe not, right? Because they could base it on your income, but they could also just base it on what school you got into and whether you're likely to succeed there. And that would be really your chances of paying back.
I mean, and then we would have to face the harsh reality that it's worth it at like 3 law schools.
Yep.
Right. I mean, or the law schools would have to get somewhat reasonable and start charging $10,000 a year tuition instead of
they would probably lower
a
their rates, because they would say, oh, we're not getting, people aren't ponying up money. Lenders aren't providing money because they're just saying, why would I lend out that much money? I don't expect that return.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a reconciliation that sucks, but it's not happening.
If you have thoughts about this issue, we would love to hear them. You can email help@thinkinglsat.com. I'm sure that this is something that we will continue to follow up about on future episodes. I'd love to have Aaron actually back on the show again sometime. So if you have follow-up questions, yeah, please email help@thinkinglsat.com. You can get on our agenda. You can join the Thinking LSAT podcast group on Facebook. I'm sure that there will be a conversation happening over there as well. We are at Thinking LSAT on Instagram and Twitter. I'm at nfox on Twitter. Ben is at Innovator Ben on Instagram. Our joint LSAT class, it's the best possible way to study for the LSAT. It's lsatdemon.com, and it is everything you need for LSAT prep. The show website is thinkinglsat.com. You can subscribe to our newsletter there. That was episode 257 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. Thanks all y'all for listening. Nice knowing you. Don't pay for law school.